Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this event towards the new equality of place, leveraging geospatial spatial data for policy impact. It's really nice to see all of you here and that you have joined us. My name is Jani Erola. I'm a principal investigator of Mapineq project, the Horizon Europe funded project between 7 countries. I'm a professor of sociology at the University of Turku, Finland, and a director of the Invest research flagship there. So this Mapineq project, we are studying inequalities across the life course, how your social environment, region, and even the country context, how that matters, and how these inequalities are basically flowing through the life course and from the life course area to another, and sometimes actually also in the ways that they are not anticipated. Indeed, this is a launch event for the Mapineq Link interactive database and dashboard, and in a minute you will get a presentation on that. That's something that when we decided to make this project, Melinda, who's going to talk in a minute, I think was her idea, and I said, why not? I mean, let's do it. And now we are finally getting to there. But apparently this is kind of like an iPhone kind of a opening project that product is almost there, but there you get a sneak peek what is actually happening there. But anyways, now I will give next floor to Professor Melinda Mills. She's going to give us an overview about the Mapineq Link and its purpose. Quite a few of you probably already know Melinda from other things. She's a work leader in the project, but also she's a director of Leverhulme Center for Demographic Science. She's a professor of demography and population health at the Oxford Population Health University of Oxford, and the founder of Data for Science. She's also a professor of data science and public health policy. Department of Economics, Econometrics, and Finance at the University of Groningen, and the Department of Genetics, UMCG, the Netherlands. And after Melinda, she will be followed by a walkthrough for this database features and capabilities by Doug Lesher. He's a senior researcher and data scientist at the Leverhulme Center for Demographic Science as well, University of Oxford, and then we should get a better idea what we are doing here. And after that, we will be going for a panel and a discussion. So, but please, Melinda, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Oh yeah, I can use this here. So thank you everyone for joining us today in the room and also online. So what we decided to do in our Mapineq project, so we're looking at inequalities across the life course and across multiple different domains. And we're looking at it with a geospatial perspective. So just to remind you, so what we decided to do when we started to look at this was think about what are the geospatial aspects. So your local neighborhood, your local region, your local city, your country. What are these different indicators that influence the opportunities that you have from your geographical location? So we gathered this together. We're going to show you in a moment, give you a bit of a tour de force through what we've developed to date. And we've included multiple different types of indicators, which I'll show you in a moment. And it's a very interactive thing for multiple uses and multiple audiences. So we've produced 4 different reports to date, and I'm just going to walk you through them. You can find them on our Mapineq website as well, too, if you're interested in the data that's available. So we first wanted to look at things that, sort of the usual suspects, or the obvious things that you would look at when you look at the life course and opportunities for individuals. So we looked at policies, so you can think about childcare, maternity leave, paternity leave, all these kind of different things and these social policies across all of these different domains. So those are the OECD, those are the Eurostat, those are sometimes the world or the different indicators that you normally would have in a data set such as this. So we have all of these policy indicators. Sometimes they're at a country level because they're made and relevant at a country level. Sometimes they're at a lower level of aggregation. We also have something that we're very excited about. So we thought, well, wait a minute, the environment just isn't about your social policy or your cultural environment. It's also about the physical environment that you live in it as well. So we'll give you some examples. So things such as pollution, things such as the temperature, humidity, the atmosphere, your relationship to green space, all of these different environmental factors that we thought were really important when people are trying to make choices and looking at their sort of opportunities and constraints in their different areas. Then we thought, well, let's do something, and I'm ramping it up now to show you all of these, and I like the surprised faces in the audience, because this is what's really fundamentally different about this database. So we're using some of our sort of classic indicators, but we're also experimenting and using indicators that people often don't use that are geospatial located. We'll give you some examples. So it's this just gives it from the real world data. So we're using things related to, for example, housing prices from commercial sites, for example. So you can get just real-time information on housing prices, for example. Or we've been testing, looking at different job site advertisements, so you can see supply and demand in a different region. So it's all this kind of experimental data. And this is just, don't worry, we're not integrating molecular genetic data and all these things, but we're showing that these classic data sets that we often use, the register data, the surveys, some of this other biosocial data, you can link it and you can layer it with all of these different kinds of aggregated data sets that come from industry, but also across the Internet of Things and many other measurements. And then finally, what we do is we combine a lot of the classic sort of demographic, socioeconomic, health, and lifestyle indicators. So if you go through and look at our report, you'll see that these are the things that people often want to know. What is the population density, for example, in the area that someone's in? What are the sex ratios? What are things such as the population composition, number of teachers, number of doctors, all of these different elements. And that's all at a different level of aggregation. Doug will show you that in a moment. So that's just a massive amount of information, and I've shown it so quickly that it's probably subliminal. So you'll be looking at, thinking of these things later, but you'll see that it's all of these different kind of measurements. Without getting into too much technical detail, if you look into our reports, you'll find that we think of this spatial data and we offer it, and we're continuing to develop this in different ways. So you can think of things such as point data. So eventually you'll be able to see, okay, so how far away am I to a hospital or a pharmacy, or how far am I away from daycare, for example. We also have line data that we'll be integrating from the built environment. So for example, it's not just the distance that you are from point A to point B, but how do you get there in terms of the infrastructure, so public infrastructure or roads and networks. Raster data as well, some of the things that we're including, and Doug can talk about that perhaps in a little while, and also polygon data. So looking at things, we'll be giving you some examples about internet speed, for example, or green space. So these are different ways to think about and use geospatial data. So just to, before I turn it over to Doug, I just wanted to sort of highlight, and I've realized that there's a sixth one that I wanted to add too. So I just wanted to highlight, so what are we doing that's quite different? Well, we're harmonizing and blending all of these multiple sources. We don't curate them, so we add things from the OECD, from Eurostat, from commercial companies, and from these different areas. We provide the references to them, and we say this is what they are, go to the original source, and you can always find the original source that is quality checked. So we have all of these different kinds of multiple sources. And I think it's very different from some of the databases. So we found that they've been quite siloed. So you would have the pollution data, and then you would want to get data about childcare, and then you would want to get data about population composition and all of these different things. And you couldn't really get it all in one place. Doug's going to show you how you can then combine that data in one place as well. And I think what we're really excited about is we're working on these very different geospatial levels. So if you have individual level data and you want to combine it, let's say you're looking at a NUTS 2, this is the European region, so NUTS 2, NUTS 3, you want to go down to a granular level, you'll be able to select that type of data. So we have all of these different types of geospatial levels. Doug will be talking to you in a moment. If you're a data scientist or a programmer, you'll be able to get our data and actually access it with an API. And I think we bring together all of these different types of data uses to different types of audiences. And the sixth point that I didn't realize, it's really important, it's free. So thank you for that point. So this is my last point that I'd like to make before I turn it over to Doug. There's really different entry points that we're going to have for this database, and it will really speak to people in different ways. So it's a website that we've developed, but also very interactive. So for policymakers, we're going to have a different journey that you'll take through our database and dashboard. So maybe you want to look at something in your area, maybe, and we'll write different case studies. If you're a journalist, maybe you want to do some investigative journalism and drill down into what are the pollution in this area, for example. Researchers will be able to use it as well. They'll be able to download the data, they'll be able to take screenshots and embed it into their articles. And data scientists as well will be able to access the data online and pull the data down for reuse as well. So now I will turn it over to Doug.
Yeah, so while Daniela pulls my slides up, I just want to start by saying we're really excited to be here sharing this work with you all, and thank you for being here. We're eager to get your feedback and your perspectives to help us improve this tool that we're developing. Thank you. Perfect, thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to build on what Melinda was just telling you about and try to get into a bit of the details for what is actually inside the tool and kind of the possibilities that are there. So the thing that we, at the beginning, we're really trying to do is bring to end users who may not be experts in using spatial data the power that there is in looking at data in a spatial way and using location as the basis to link different data sets together. We want to build a tool that empowers you and all different types of end users to explore these types of data for yourself and bring your unique perspective to find interesting trends in these spatial data sets that are worth further investigation and where interesting stories can be built on. So there's three kind of components to this, what we're referring to as this database. There's three different components to this that kind of target what Melinda was just showing you of these different audiences that we're interested in communicating with. First is the actual database itself. So this is a place where we're trying to bring together indicators of different types from a bunch of different sources. So this includes traditional data sources like Eurostat and OECD, but it also includes non-traditional data sources like satellite-based measures of air quality or social media user activity, so that we can link these things together. And the database is designed in such a way that we can look at data sets across spatial scales, importantly trying to drill down beyond national level metrics to get to subnational levels. Importantly, there is a web application sitting in front of this database. This is how we make this accessible to a broad audience. We're trying to use this to tell stories. So people that might not want to actually get their hands on the numbers, but just see the stories that are arising from looking at these data, all the way to the other end of the spectrum of people who really want access to that data to analyze for themselves. And then the last one here, the API. API stands for Application Programming Interface. And what this is really not important, other than to say, generally, this is the way that a website talks to a database. And what we're doing is we're trying to open that API up for public access so that end users can pull data directly out of the database and also potentially display it in their own way on their own websites to just expand the impact of what we're doing. So this is what the landing page for this tool looks like. It's just a normal website, and we've broken this down kind of at different levels, targeting different end users. And so I'm going to talk about this in kind of 3 levels. The first we've labeled Get Inspired. So this is presenting case studies where we are just showcasing results that have been derived from data that are in this database. So trying to communicate a story, not giving people all of the hard numbers for analysis, but just creating the story, and giving examples of how these types of data can be used in innovative ways. The second one, labeled Explore, this is the actual interactive dashboard itself, where anyone can go to the website, click around, and try to find interesting relationships between data sets, and importantly, between data sets that might otherwise be difficult to compare to one another. And then the last one, API Deep Dive. This is for people like me, all the nerds in the room that really want to pull data into their data analysis. So think of a PhD student who wants to be able to pull data down in different ways and do an analysis on that. This is the tool for them. So the first one, case studies where we want to tell stories. This is something where we are curating and writing short blogs, basically, to explain interesting relationships that we found in these data sets. And I think for all of you in the room, who are people who may have stories of your own to tell, we would be quite interested in speaking with you and working together to build case studies around work that you may yourself be doing, and integrating those data sources into this database. So just one example of that, Melinda has written one of the case studies looking at pandemic preparedness. So trying to link number of hospital beds available in different subnational areas to the population over the age of 75, to identify areas where the at-risk population may be outstripping the vulnerable population in a pandemic. And so she's written a nice vignette around this, which links directly over to the data that are in the database related to this topic. Within the website, there's a data catalog, and this just gives you a path, an easy path to just enter a search term and see what data we have in the database related to this search term. There's lots of data in here from Eurostat and OECD, and this is because both of these providers have made it quite easy for us to kind of bulk import their data into this database. But there's also lots of non-traditional data in the database and more that we're working to add every day. So this is the actual interactive map and dashboard. This is what it looks like. I'm just going to give you a few screenshots here to show you some examples. This is the dashboard related to the pandemic preparedness case study. And so before I walk through the actual data that are being shown here, I just want to orient you to what's on the screen. So on the right, you have an interactive map that you can zoom in on that's showing the data that you've selected on the left. One thing that's different about the way we've designed this tool is we are inviting you to select 2 different variables. So an X and a Y, a predictor and an outcome. And our hope is that this will help all of you and the public explore relationships that are in these data sources. And so here we've chosen as the X, as the predictor variable on the left, available beds in hospitals by NUTS2 regions. So these are subnational administrative units that you see on the map. And then on the right, the proportion of the population over the age of 75. You see a scatter plot. So how do these two things relate to one another? And then the map is colored in such a way that you can easily find locations that have lots of hospital beds or not enough hospital beds for that at-risk population. You can quite easily hover on the map and highlight the data points that are being shown in the top right, or vice versa. Hover over the data points and see where that is on the map. And this, in this case, is making it quite easy to highlight an outlier here in northern Italy, where there is a high population over the age of 75 and quite a low number of hospital beds, which is a critical piece of information combining two data sources for studying pandemic preparedness. I'll just quickly go through a couple of other examples. In this one, I've selected broadband speeds. So these are measured by a company called Ookla. So if you do an internet speed test online, it's a good chance that Ookla is the one doing that test. So we're getting mobile broadband speeds from Ookla and comparing it to the employment rate of young people. So looking at how does that mobile network coverage and speed relate to employment rates for young people. And we see on the right, a positive correlation, and you can see how those trends play out on the map. I think it's important to mention, here we're exploring correlations between variables, and I'm not necessarily saying these things are cause and effect, but this is a easy and quick way to explore these relationships and look at them spatially on the map. Here I'm taking that same predictor variable, mobile broadband speeds, and comparing it to youth unemployment rates. Here we're taking a satellite-derived measure of particulate matter in the air, so an air quality metric, and linking it with perinatal mortality rates. And so again, this is an example of taking a non-traditional data source that requires some expert knowledge to analyze satellite-derived measures and easily linking it over to the Eurostat data. And then I've taken just that same air quality measure and linked it here with population with a tertiary education. And again, you're seeing these data relationships that would otherwise be quite hard to find or require some time and expertise to find, kind of at the click of a button, and easy to explore. Once you've found them, you can export the data for analysis, or you can look at the sources that we've pulled the data from to go get it and analyze it yourself. The last slide I won't spend a lot of time on. This is coming back to this API that I mentioned briefly at the beginning. So this is a tool for programmers, and there are two big uses for this. One, to submit automated queries to our database and get data back. So the PhD student example I gave you, so you have a researcher who wants to pull data in different ways from our database. They can do this directly from their data analysis console and get that data easily. And also to get updated data as we're adding new things in. And then the second really important application of this is for web developers. So if you have a website and you want to display some of this data on your website, your web developers can pull from this tool to show the data directly from our database on your website and have it updated as we update the database. So this can be quite a powerful tool, although for a smaller audience, I think. I just want to end with some next steps. So the first one is quite important today, a phased rollout of this tool to beta testers and then the public. And so all of you, by expressing your interest and coming here today, we would very much like to get you involved and hear your impressions of the tool and the data that are in it and how we could improve it. So you can go to the mapineq.eu website, and there's a contact us form where you can reach out to us there. We're working and will continue to be working to streamline the dashboard, the controls, add more data into it. And ultimately, we want to expand beyond the scope of Europe to have a global extent of the data that are in the tool, and start working on more advanced functionality, which we can talk a bit about maybe in the panel session. I'll end there, and I'll just put the link to the Mapineq website where you can reach out to us if you're interested in getting involved. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Doug. And we move on to the panel discussion. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest here. First, Bastian Alm, Head of Division, Regional Economic and Structural Policy, joins team for the improvement of regional economic structures from the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action, please. And then we have Nicola Brandt, Head of OECD Berlin Center. Please welcome. Then Paul Gellert, Co-Director of the Einstein Center Population Diversity and Associate Professor at the Institute of Medical Sociology and Rehabilitation Science, Charité. And finally, Melinda, who we already introduced. Okay, welcome all, and nice to see you all here. Let's start with the easy one. What's your initial reactions to what was presented? Who wants to start?
It's really cool, and it's it's also, I think it's also, I mean, I think all of it is really a bit nerdy, right? But it gets me really excited that all this data is pulled together and you can use it, you can play around with it. At the same time, it did make me a bit nervous too when I saw these stories. And yes, you said we're looking at correlations, not causation. But if you think about policymakers, journalists, particularly perhaps in times of crisis in the pandemic, you can do a lot of great things with data, and you can also do a lot of harm. So that's perhaps my question. So how to the producers, how will you stay in touch with the users to make sure that what you put in there, the functionalities, etc., are in line with different needs? As you said, you're targeting policymakers and journalists and also researchers. And then how will you keep a high quality discussion on, what, that you don't do garbage with that you get meaningful information out of the data? That's what really interests me about the discussion we have.
Okay, let's wait a second. You can answer to that in a minute.
Yeah, it was really amazing to see all this growing, and this tool is not in action, right? But it will be soon, as I understood correctly. I was really wondering, and we had a brief discussion on this already in the coffee break, how you ensure the sustainability on the one side, because that's really, if you have this fantastic infrastructure and it's growing and the users are there and everybody's receiving this, then how could you make sure that it's continue over the first phase of the project? And the second question is, how would you do the implementation? I mean, you said, of course, the next step would be the rolling out of this project, but how would you make sure that all the policymakers, especially the local policymakers that may be unaware of this platform, not only the statisticians and data scientists are really keen using this platform, but also really the practitioners, how you make sure to reach them across all these countries? Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Bastian. Yeah.
Yes, so I can only agree. This is really fantastic. Was the best decision today I made to come here to get this sneak preview. So thanks, Melinda and Doug, for this fantastic preview of the beta version you worked out. So I think the way you combine classic and real world data is really amazing. I haven't seen it in that depth and broadness, so that was very, very interesting to see. Very experimental, but that goes beyond at least the data sources I have seen so far. Also that you do that not only on the national level, but that you go below on, you mentioned Melinda, NUTS 2 and NUTS 3 level. This is very decisive and important in terms of local development, not to do it just on the national, but also on the regional level. Different geospatial data types you've shown. I'm keen to better understand about the capabilities of this approach and the way you visualize the data, so very lean, and your XY approach. I think this is very good way to address it. So very promising, actually. Very smart approach. So thanks, and I will be a beta tester, definitely. So I was asking myself, I've seen a lot of white spots also in Germany, unfortunately. But so are you still working to fill those gaps? And also, like Nicola asked, will there be webinars for policymakers or other things to better understand and learn about the capability of your tool?
Please, Melinda.
So I'll start, Doug, if you would like to say something after too, just nod. So yes, how will this data not be misused? So I think that's a really relevant point because what we're showing is correlations, not causation. So we will have a blog about what this can and cannot do and what you can and cannot say with this data. So almost like a disclaimer that we often have with our scientific work as well, unfortunately, about that as well too, because you can make conclusions. We're not showing causal relationships, and there's many things that can cause the relationship between these two variables. So we'll make sure that we're very, very clear about that. We'll have to have it in multiple places. So we'll have, you know, a frequently asked questions and what can you interpret from this data set or this association, what can you not? And we'll have it on the case studies that we talk about, and we'll have it in various places because you can't say it enough. So I agree with you that people could take this and go down to a very small regional level. And that could be actually, we've done this before in some geospatial examples, and people contacted us from the area and said, you know, I've got the media contacting me now saying we don't have hospital beds and, you know, and things. So you can actually really, you have to be really responsible with how you're covering this work. To answer maybe both of your questions, we have a series with Population Europe. We're planning a series of webinars aimed to show exactly how to use this data. Those will be on the website. We'll also have some tutorials that we'll walk through and show people how to use it. And we'll have some live sort of Q&A sessions as well. I think you gave us some ideas as well. Paul, you were talking about how are we going to get to the local policymakers. We probably could have some practitioner workshops, and that would help us develop this further as well too, because what we have now is actually fully functioning and available. So what you see, we showed some screenshots, but you should never do anything live. We've known that these sort of things in case of internet or something. But so actually people could already use it and test it. So, but I think it's a really useful suggestion that we could have sort of a roadshow or something, or test this out with certain groups if they're interested and see if we're meeting their needs. As well, you talked about the different capabilities, and we'll be developing those over time as well too. So we're building it up. We actually have thousands of variables and information in there, but that will be there. Okay, now finally the white spots. Okay. This is also a problem with our color contrast in the beta version, because actually some of the white spots are just a lighter correlation between the two variables. So it's not as bad as you think. So that was picked up by other people as well too. So we do have missing data. And actually we were talking with people from the OECD, Eurostat, and other places. They actually would like to see where the missing data is to, you know, so we can try to fill those gaps and see where the gaps are. So it wasn't necessarily that Germany was not there. It was just so these are the kind of things that you test as well. I think I captured most of the questions. Doug, do you have anything to add? No, okay.
Yeah, I guess the initial surprises for us was that there were so many white spots on different things actually when we started the whole thing. Okay, yeah.
Just jump in just to because as you use the OECD data and perhaps you use the regions and cities database, and we actually do have a lot of white gaps in Germany there. So it's something we should perhaps work on together.
You have to negotiate it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's say take another angle then. So okay, I mean, there's a lot of areas where this kind of a data is already being used, but of course it's kind of a much more partial. What do you think are the kind of a particular areas of improvement where this kind of a special value for this kind of a data could be?
How would this data be?
Yeah, or other ones, or you want to enter something else here as well?
So at the OECD, we're trying, so we have regional and local data along administrative lines, but I think the geospatial dimension is really important because you can do things like you can look at what is called functional urban areas, actually the local labor market, if you will, and then things when you were looking at, you said that you're using points, but also lines. I was thinking of some work I did in the past on deprived neighborhoods in France, where it's really, so it plays a big role how long it takes you from point A to B in the labor market in order, so transport time, not only distance, is important for your access to the labor market, etc. And if we were able to actually combine different data sources on all these different dimensions with geospatial data for different population groups, I think we can actually answer a lot of questions in a way that we cannot answer today. So it would be fantastic. But I do have also the question about sustainability. So what are we going to do to keep it there?
I forgot to answer that question. Apologies. I actually couldn't read my own handwriting. But yeah, so we've been talking about sustainability, and this is a 3-year project, and European projects are often funded for 3 years. So actually we've got 1 year left. And you can imagine that we've been building this intensively for the last few years. So we're already looking into sustainability for follow-up funding, to see if we can get some philanthropic funding, to get some support from the University of Groningen, where we're located, and the University of Oxford, to see if we can get more support for this. And we'd be obviously interested from you or anyone in the room or online as well too, because this is really an important source, and we really want multiple people to be able to use it. And we'd like to avoid charging for it if we can, because we think we're reusing data and collecting it from data that was, for the public good. So if we're able to find a way to do this, we can. And I think for sustainability as well, we've built it in a way that it can be expanded beyond Europe as well. And that interests then different funders and different groups as well, because this is, as you said, combining really different types of data, and particularly for low and middle income countries, there'll be interest as well. Doug, I don't know if you want to add anything to this.
So on the sustainability bit, I would just add that the code that we're developing that runs all of this, the intention is for this to be open source, available to the public, so that 20 years from now, if this is no longer running, the code behind it all to import the data, to build the database itself, to build the website, the way the tool works, this is all open source code and can be replicated. And the other benefit there is soliciting input from your organizations, programmers around the world, to help us improve it and contribute to the code itself. So I think that open source component is quite important for the sustainability side of it as well.
Yes, I think we can actually benefit significantly as a federal government from this data source, as it's free to use, as we can actually combine it with our own data, with our own projections and things like that. So we can benefit, and also on the Länder level or the municipalities, they might actually benefit if they understand about the potential of the data source, as their technical infrastructure is getting better. Of course, they may be lacking administrative capacities to work with the data, but maybe this can be bridged, at least to a certain extent. So I'm convinced that this is a very promising approach.
Maybe I can add to this. I think also local policymakers really can benefit from this database more than researchers could do. Although I see also the point for the research. I have a positive example from one of our ongoing projects where we went to one of the rural local districts near Berlin, and the local policymakers there created a demography forum and collected all the data from their municipalities and from the whole district. And I think they would really benefit from one of these data source, since they can benchmark also their districts against others in the region. So it really also, it's important how close you can get to certain areas and how broad you would need to stay on a federal level as compared to municipality level, for instance. Especially in Germany, we saw there some white spots, and for instance, for the English index of multiple deprivation, which is really fine-grained. In Germany, we only have the German index of socioeconomic deprivation, which is very rough and cannot really disentangle neighborhoods. So it's really crucial here that this is very broad. And I think with your geospatial data, you can really contribute to this fine-graining process, even in Germany.
Yeah, no, I think these are all really, really important points. I think, you know, the point that you said about it's exactly what we were thinking about, that it's not as the crow flies the distance. You were talking about transport. It's about, you could be relatively close, but if there's no regular transport for jobs and things like that, then it's really important. So that's why we're trying to think outside of the box, and we're adding the sort of classic indicators because you need those, but as well, really trying to add different, like really different things. So in the digital space, in the job space, in the transport, some of the satellite derived measures. So I think that's where we can add definitely. And I really appreciate you putting that to, it's kind of a challenge for us, isn't it? That will be one of the things we'll go back and work on, and we'll send you the link and see what you think. Capacities, I think you raised. I think it's a really key question, and that's probably something we have to think about a bit more if we're working with like the land or the municipalities or those sort of levels, and thinking about how we could work together to build, you know, co-build capacities as well in terms from our tutorials, but also find out what people need as well too. And yeah, Paul, I really appreciate the example. I think those are the kind of things that we'll have to do more as we do more testing, you know, with our users in the community, get an idea of what people really need. And, you know, you could build, I mean, the dream would be to build something like this socioeconomic status deprivation from these multiple indicators. So the idea is that people could actually do that, and it will allow you to benchmark. You'll be able to visually see how your region is similar to another region in Italy, or how you're, you know, so it offers some really interesting and quite, you know, in terms of quite accessible visual sort of capabilities as well too.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
And because we were talking about how this can be useful to policymakers, and that you have to build capacity. There's a group called, I don't know whether you're aware, there's a group called the Geospatial Lab at the OECD, where they do where my colleagues bring together, so the producers of data, geospatial data, and users. And perhaps it will be, we should link you up with that, because they actually do say that it's extremely important to have that exchange, to basically understand each other's needs, and then possibility understand what policymakers actually want to know. So in order for you to pull together the right data, give them the functionalities that they need, and then also tell them what you really cannot do with the kind of data you're providing.
Yeah, maybe getting the final questions actually about, yeah, how we, I mean, I think this is a fair point that how we actually lure in the people, and especially at the local level, decision makers? What would be your opinion, kind of, what's the appeal for them to actually start looking at this tool? Maybe, Bastian, you can start first.
Yes, so what we observed as we just adopted this kind of Gleichwertigkeitsbericht, so it's the equivalency report in Germany, that there's a very high interest on the municipal level, also on the Länder level, for the questions on what is the status quo of living conditions in my region? What is the perception of the citizens living in my regions regarding access to infrastructure, public services, education, health, other things? So what we tried in that report, and I recommend you to have a look at it actually, is that we try to like analyze how living conditions can be improved in Germany, what's the status quo, and what are the differences between all of the indicators you are analyzing and we try to analyze, if there were not the white spots in Germany, but some indicators we can access. Where are like the contrast to the perception of the people living on the ground, and how can we change the situation, right? So what we now try to do in the second step is to get into discussions with the citizens on these patterns of living conditions in Germany. And I think the transparency regarding data, that this can help to have this fundament you need to analyze what is the status quo and what policy measures can help to improve the situation.
Others?
Yeah, maybe just a short note. Usually it's good to have a participatory approach and somehow like bring their knowledge into this last year before you really like roll it out completely. So really asking what they need, and it's very important.
Yeah, I think it's important to have, you know, the possibility to link different data from different sources, but I think it's always important then to think, if we think about policy making, how can we actually think about what drives results, outcomes, right? And then, of course, you cannot stop at the correlation, but you would somehow, in an ideal world, this database would grow, right? And you could bring in, it would be great to connect research to it, which actually does things like showing how actually transport distance to jobs affects employment opportunities, or how perhaps living conditions, even at the neighborhood level, can affect the transmission of diseases, or also the general health level, and then your ability to be successful in education, etc. And I think if you were able to do that, to bring together the research, the question, and answer the questions of policymakers, of practitioners, and have sort of a community that is sustainable, then this would be a real great success, I think.
Let me start with the last comment. So I've got very good news, and that's that this is one part of the Mapineq project. And actually what we're doing is exactly this kind of research. So what we do is we link this environmental or geospatial data, we link it to often individual longitudinal data. So for example, there's some examples of looking at low emission zones, and and looking at that in different neighborhoods, for example, or changes in pollution or green space. And then we link it with longitudinal data over time. And you can do natural experiments to see how this changes, or you can see compared to an area that didn't introduce policies to ones that did introduce intervention. So that's exactly what we're doing in the research in this project. We can't make that individual data openly available because there's many different data agreements, but we can say how other people can use that data and how they can use the research. So I think it's a really valid point, and that's what we're building now. And those are some of the case studies that Doug was showing you as well. So I think that's really important, is linking that. And then that gets to your point of what drives the results, because you can't just show these correlations. You have to show, okay, well, if you change, what are the policy levers that I can change, and give some indications there as well too. So you'll be able to see some areas are dark blue, and why is that? And you can dig, do a deeper dive into that. And I think what's really interesting is some of the things that you were talking about, and I will definitely look at the Gelijkwaardigheidbericht. Hope I said it okay. But no, I'll definitely look at it because I think you raised some interesting points about benchmarking. So people want to benchmark and I'm hoping that we'll be benchmarking across regions or neighborhoods. And you'll almost be able to develop some sort of synthetic control, as we call. So you'll almost be able to say, for example, these 27 traits in this region, how do they compare with this region? And what's different? What could be the policy levers that we could change to make these more equal, for example? And you raised a really interesting point as well about perceptions. So how do people perceive? We don't have that data currently in the database, but I think it's a really interesting thing about how people perceive their situation as well, too. So it's another really valid point we could introduce.
Okay, let's move on to then the questions to the audience. So raise